said, as FBI Director Christopher Wray just got grilled in a hearing by Representative Matt Gaetz. Now, during a hearing in front of the House Judiciary Committee, Matt Gaetz, he questioned Christopher Wray about what really happened during the Trump Pennsylvania rally that took place about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago in Butler, Pennsylvania. So these officials are hailed by critics as professional liars. It's also why it's very hard to get a very simple yes or no from them. And it's also why this shifting of gears from Matt Gaetz caused Christopher Wray to be caught off guard, so to speak, because he was throwing very simple questions, and then all of a sudden he just kind of switched up talking about President Joe Biden and his clear cognitive decline. Now, the intent here is he wants to know who else is responsible for keeping President Joe Biden in office, even though in reality, the president has been struggling with his mental sharpness. Now, a few names come to mind, but one that's more noticeable is the name of the VP. We're talking about Vice President Kamala Harris. And she basically was said to have been in numerous meetings with President Joe Biden. Now, as the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party, it's alarming that she would go out of her way to lie for the president. And the comments from Kamala Harris started around, fall of last year? Now, there's even one point where she criticized Republicans for even questioning Joe Biden. Y'all remember that? And by the way, if you haven't already, hit the like button for the video, subscribe to the channel, do all that YouTube-y stuff. I really appreciate you guys. But according to Kamala Harris, age being raised as an issue was more of a last resort for the opposition, as they had nothing to run on. Well, it looks like critics of the president and the vice president have a lot more running on their hands. In fact, it's almost certain that Republicans will have a marathon running regarding this issue. And it's all starting with FBI Director Christopher Wray. Take a listen.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Was the shooter on the FBI's radar in any way prior to the assassination attempt?
We did not have any information about the shooter. He was not in our holdings before the shooting.
No communication in any chat rooms, no CIs or confidential human sources have any interaction with?
No, we've run a thorough search for the subject through all of our holdings, and he was not in them anywhere.
Were there any FBI agents or informants present at the Trump rally in Butler?
Not to my knowledge.
And Mr. Jordan was talking to you about Iran. Were law enforcement resources diverted from the protection of President Trump to John Bolton as a consequence of concern that Mr. Bolton might have been the target of Iranian malign efforts?
That's really a Secret Service decision. I don't know the answer to that. That's really something they would know better. What I can tell you is that there are a number of individuals. You mentioned one who we've brought a case, a specific criminal case for the Iranians targeting for assassination. But how?
Are you going to get that answer to us? Whether or not resources were diverted from Trump to Bolton? Is that just going to be part of your review?
I think that's going to be part of the reviews by the Inspector General.
The Inspector General for DHS, right?
Of DHS, right. and the outside panel.
And I think that's an important point, because the Inspector General for DHS has really fallen out of favor with the administration, because he's been pointing out all the problems on the border with Mayorkas and Biden, and we're always kind of worried that they're about to fire him, which would be a really bad idea.
How many people think that Christopher Wray should get fired?
Now that this role that you've identified is so critical, be a bad idea to fire the IG for DHS during the pendency of this, right, Mr. Director?
I don't think that would be a good idea.
I'm with you on that. So I want to zoom out.
I think it's rather interesting how you got all these directors of these different agencies, and how, there's always these pending investigations and they can never, ever quite answer any questions, right? A lot of folks are looking at what's happening here. We almost lost a presidential candidate. We almost lost a former president by way of a underhanded, very, very, underhanded pitch, really easy sniper attempt here. And many people are looking at this as possible treason. But what do you guys think about this? Matt Gaetz is literally hitting Christopher Wray rapid fire with these questions, just hitting the FBI director left and right. But let's continue to listen to Christopher Wray squirm as Matt Gaetz just hits him back to back with all these questions. And I want you guys to pay attention to how he changes gears and start talking about Biden's cognitive decline.
A little bit. How often do you brief President Biden?
You mean on this
No, just
specific
general.
case?
No, in your role as FBI director.
I mean, I don't know that I could give you a number.
Is it like weekly, monthly, daily?
It's not at a regular cadence. There have been times when there have been months at a time when I haven't, and then there have been times when several days apart I have. It's always with other people.
The vice president, is she typically there?
Often has been.
Okay, so when did you notice his decline?
In my interactions, in my role, all my interactions with the current president have been completely professional.
Right, but I mean the cognitive decline.
What does that have to do with Matt Gaetz's question? Whether it's professional or it's a personal relationship Christopher Wray has with President Biden, the question is, when did you notice Biden's cognitive decline?
In my role, all my interactions with the current president have been completely professional.
Right, but I mean the cognitive decline. I'm not saying he treated you unprofessionally, just maybe not picking things up as quickly as he used to.
Again, I don't meet with him very often, but what you're describing is not something that I've observed during my interactions with him.
I mean, we've had it observed so often that the ranking member and Mr. Schiff on this committee have said that he could no longer continue as a candidate. And so, since you're the FBI director, I was just sort of wondering, like, who's running the country?
Now, what Christopher Wray says here is everything.
Like if something bad happened
Or more importantly, what Christopher Wray doesn't say.
in the country. Like if something bad happened, you'd have to go brief President Biden about it right now. God forbid.
And on any number of occasions, I have briefed the president, and as I said, those briefings have all been uneventful and unremarkable.
Oh, I can imagine them being uneventful. But in the work where the vice president's also present, like you say, there's like more than half the time there's these briefings, she's there too.
I don't know if I said more than half the time. Certainly, there have been times where she's been present. There have been other times where she hasn't.
I take you at your word when you say this is the most complicated threat environment you've ever observed over a long career in law enforcement. And I'm just kind of wondering, with this assassination attempt, with the invasion at our border, with all the Hamas that have been let in that you've talked about and briefed about, like, is Biden up to it? And if he's not up to it, and you're a guy who's been regularly briefing him, like who's been in on this conspiracy to hide the real Joe Biden from all of us for years? It never occurred to you that this guy wasn't up to it in all these briefings you did?
As I said, my briefings with the president have all been completely fine.
Were they
I've
between
briefed,
10 a.m. and
he's
4
asked
p.m.?
questions. There hasn't been anything of note in the area that you're talking about.
Yeah, did you ever have to brief him before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m.? We hear those are his good hours.
I've certainly times that I have briefed have included outside those hours.
Right, okay. I just, I think the American people want to know how we got to this point with someone who's so diminished, his own party has basically put him out to pasture. And since you had close proximity and the vice president had close proximity, I'm just kind of wondering if you were being straight with all of us about how things were going with him, I guess.
Wow. So was Christopher Wray lying to us all along? Like, has Christopher Wray, number one, is Christopher Wray also experiencing some form of cognitive issues? I mean, for him not to be able to recognize cognitive declines with the president of the United States, a man who is the leader of the free nation, the leader of the free world, or, are you in on it? Because there's clearly a coup that is taking place here, and they forced Joe Biden out against his will. Even Joe Biden was the last person that wanted to see Joe Biden booted out of office. We've already covered this, and Joe Biden has made it very clear that she wants to remain the first lady of the United States. She wanted to remain in the White House. She doesn't want to lose the power. She certainly doesn't want to see her own child. Jill Biden doesn't want to see her son, Hunter Biden, go to jail. And if Joe Biden's no longer president, well, then daddy can't protect him. That's a big problem here, folks. Now, you guys heard how Christopher Wray suddenly paused, right? How he suddenly became hesitant to answer multiple questions that were asked by Representative Matt Gaetz, right? Now, also, he's saying that it's okay for Donald Trump to have some of his security detail removed for the protection of other people. So it's like, was this a coerced assassination attempt against Donald Trump? Now, the former director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, denied ever having done this. But get this, First Lady Jill Biden was said to have had around 4 times more Secret Service detail compared to Donald Trump on the day that he was shot. Donald Trump, keep in mind, take these numbers into consideration, guys, okay? So Donald Trump, he was in an open area with like 20,000 attendees, while the First Lady was inside of a casino with like 400 people, all right? Now, as you can tell, there's a huge discrepancy. So Trump's out in the open, 20,000 attendees. First Lady's inside of a casino with 400 people, but yet the First Lady, Jill Biden, has 4 times more Secret Service detail than Donald Trump has. Come on, guys. Come on, right? And Matt Gaetz, he had that gotcha moment when he kind of steered the conversation toward President Joe Biden's mental acuity. So this has now led to former President Donald Trump saying that Christopher Wray has to resign or just straight up fire this guy. Christopher Wray is set to be the FBI director until 2027. Now, Donald Trump argues that he has been basically sweet talking Congress every time he goes up. In that exchange, Christopher Wray pretty much stalled the questions about Biden's mental health, instead alluding to a notion that the president was completely fine during all of their briefings, even going so far as to say that he found nothing wrong mentally or even physically with the president. Now, Donald Trump on his end is saying that anyone can see that Joe Biden is cognitively and physically challenged. And if Christopher Wray, the FBI director, can't see this, then he cannot be fit to lead any government agency, let alone the FBI. Now, this is what we're hearing from Donald Trump, guys. The FBI director, he's supposed to be very sharp. He's supposed to be picking up on things. Remember, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, like they're supposed to be the elite. How are you not going to pick up on somebody mentally slowing down, especially the leader of the free world? I mean, you could argue the same thing, can be asked of Vice President Kamala Harris, as she was also said to have been included in these meetings. So, how come she didn't notice anything? Unless she's been lying to us too. Now, speaking of the VP, she's calling out Donald Trump to debate. Harris says that she's ready for a debate and that the voters deserve to see the split screen that exists in this race on the debate stage. Now, what do y'all think? Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, they're in a debate. Who's going to win that one? Let me know in the comments down below. Stephen Chung, the Trump campaign communications director, answered that these details cannot be finalized until after the Democratic Party has decided on their nominee. Now, I've been seeing, some news outlets basically saying Donald Trump quit. Donald Trump dropped out of the debate against Kamala Harris. Don't believe the headlines, guys. Donald Trump did not drop out of the debate. Donald Trump did not quit. Basically, they want to know for sure who is actually going to be in the debate against Donald Trump before committing, because the last thing you want to do is commit to debating against Vice President Kamala Harris, and your whole strategy is pinned against debating that individual, and then at the last minute, there's another coup, and then they replace Kamala Harris with somebody else. I don't know, RFK Jr., maybe Gavin Newsom, who knows? Who knows who they might throw in there? I mean, hey, it might even be Michelle Obama for all I know. But they just don't want to commit to anybody until they've actually committed that Vice President Kamala Harris is actually going to be there to stay, right? So it makes a lot of sense. Now, Chung, he also said that that basically would be inappropriate to schedule things with Kamala Harris and then have another person face off against Donald Trump because they changed their minds about her. Now, we already saw this. We went through this last week with Joe Biden getting kicked out, Joe Biden resigning, right? So Donald Trump on his end has said that he's open to debating against the vice president more than once. Alex Conant, he's a Republican consultant, said that the debate between the two could be decisive. Now, much like how Donald Trump forced the hand of the Democratic Party to remove President Biden, the same might actually happen to Kamala Harris. It's not impossible. In fact, I almost expect it. How many of you guys think that Kamala Harris may actually get the boot too? And since we mentioned his name, President Joe Biden has finally, after who knows how long, has finally appeared before the public's eye. He's been allegedly under the weather with COVID or whatever, who knows. But the president spoke from the Oval Office to address why he stepped down from the 2024 presidential race. Now, I've been seeing a lot of videos about Biden, and it looks like there may be a clone, or maybe it's AI, or maybe there's multiple Bidens. But it's like he doesn't seem to be the same every time. Y'all ever notice that? Like his face, his mannerisms, the way he moves his hands and folds his hands, even his eyes. Like his eyes seem like really like beady some days, like kind of glossy. Sometimes he never blinks. He's like, like he doesn't blink for like 2 minutes at a time. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if he's like a bot or something. Anyway, according to President Biden, the decision was a matter of saving democracy and passing on the torch to a new generation. He adds that he reveres the office of the president, but that he loves the country more. He sees it as a way to unite the nation. His speech comes just in time for polls to show that he's reached a new low with his approval ratings. So, not looking good for the big guy. So, basically, in a recent Gallup poll, it shows that Joe Biden has an approval rating of only 36%. 36%, guys, that's pretty freaking bad. Not a good look for a president who wants to keep doing this for the next 4 years, or wanted to keep doing this for the next 4 years. By the way, it's also not good news for the predecessor, as they're both being seen as one person when it comes to policies. Kamala Harris and President Biden, they basically shared the same brain and they shared the same policies. So even if Joe Biden drops out, if you didn't like his policies, chances are you're not going to like Kamala Harris's policies because she basically did everything that he said. Matter of fact, she didn't really do anything. She just kind of like, took up space and sucked up oxygen and wore the vice president title, but really didn't do anything. By the way, I did a previous video where I talked about how a lot of women feel about Vice President Kamala Harris, or as some people call her, Carmela Harrison, or Camel Toe Harris. She's got a lot of different names. I don't know what you guys call her, but here's the bad news. They think she's not so bright. Would you believe that? Women think that she's not so bright. Now, a lot of people said, hey, Kamala Harris, Camel Toe Harris, Carmela Harrison will appeal to the broader female demographic because she's a woman. Some people say she's a black woman. Other people say she's not really black. She's like half Indian or she's half Jamaican. I don't even remember her full percentage of nationality, how it's divvied up or whatever. But some people say she's black. Other people are like, no, she's not really black. And then, of course, people are, Headboard Harris. Appreciate that, Catalia. Oh, my God. Headboard Harris. Oh, that's a good one. But anyway, yeah. And then, people are looking back at her history, being the DA of California. She's an attorney by trade. And somebody says half idiot. But the thing is people are looking back at her history and they're looking at how many black people she put behind bars. And then when people were up for parole, how she tried to keep a lot of people of color in jail behind bars for various reasons, including I've heard she wanted to keep black people in prison for free labor, like modern day slavery. Because they take the slaves, the prisoners, and have them do free community service, cleaning up the sides of the highways. You guys have seen these people out here. And, and then not to mention, how many people end up getting put in jail that were absolutely innocent. So anyway, I did a previous video where I talk about how a lot of women feel about Vice President Kamala Harris. But here's the bad news. They think she's not so bright. They use the term a lot more harsh than I just used. So make sure you guys check that video out after this one. But before I go, appreciate you guys. Faris Seagram says the borders are. Yeah, she ain't done nothing for the border. And anyway, appreciate you guys. Hit the like button, subscribe.